All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my 2022 CUSA predictions. There'll be timestamps below if you'd like to skip around and give some light analysis on each team. So make sure you guys look down below if you're looking for a specific somebody. Kicking things off, though, UAB, I project them to win the regular season championship. Bill Clark, sudden retirement this summer. Brian Vincent takes over. He was with the program back in 2014. He was here for the reinstatement. He's been around a while. So he takes over for Clark. And he gets a solid, pretty offense to work with. Dylan Hopkins, 2,200 yards last season, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks. QB play for the Blazers has been very up and down the past few years. So Hopkins, he's brought some stability to this position. And the receiving game, they have holes to fill, though. Trey Schroffsphere, 27 receptions for an absurd 700-plus yards. That's 26 yards per reception. He's really the only guy they have with experience. Dexter Boykin comes over from Northern Alabama. T.J. Jones, they picked him up from last year out of Penn State. So the receiving game is certainly a question mark, but the great running game they possess is the biggest reason why they're going to dominate this conference. 180 yards per game as a team last year. Should keep going up. That number wasn't terrific considering the two backs they had last year and the production these guys provided. Dwayne McBride, 1,371 yards, 13 touchdowns, 6.7 yards per carry. And then Jermaine Brown, 731 and 7 scores. One of the better 1-2 punches in all of college football. So I think they should easily eclipse 200 rush yards per game this fall. 3 starters are back on that offensive line. It was pretty sluggish in pass protection, so I think the entire passing game is a kind of a question mark this year. It's certainly the biggest thing to watch with me here for UAB. There's a great deal on the defense coming back. They get 5 starters with the new guys stepping up in the lineup. Made an impact last year, but the guys that do come back that I'm high on, middle linebacker Noah Wilder, he's one of the standouts. 93 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. Keandre Swoops at safety, 52 stops, 8 plays on the ball. And then those tackle Fish McWilliams, these guys they're looking to get a lot of play out of this year, 6', 315. He's going to be an enforcer for them on the interior. And then Kelly Sanders, he's a veteran outside linebacker, 15th ranked defense a season ago. Struggled more against the pass, handful of less than stellar efforts versus the pass, but I think they're really good against the run overall. They play very sound defense. I think UAB, even with Bill Clark departing and some uncertainty at wide receiver, this is definitely going to be a really good football team. They're going to be sound in all regards, and I think they'll win the conference championship. Coming in runner-up in the regular season, UTSA, they went 12-2 last year, won the conference, 37 points per game. The offense was great. They had such good balance. Frank Harris is back, 66% completion rate, 3,100 yards, 27-6 ratio. It was a big breakout year for him last season because he was not been too shabby the years prior than that. So big breakout year from him. He also ran for 561 and 6 touchdowns, so Harris provides a lot for them. Sincere McCormick departs, but Traylon Smith, he arrives from Arkansas, 598 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 5 yards per carry for him, and then they're going to pair him up with Braden Bray. Well, Smith split time with guys at Arkansas, too. That was a very strong running game, so those are some pretty impressive numbers from him. Bray, though, a 215-pounder. He had 4 touchdowns and 308 yards last season, so they got a nice little 1-2 here. Return all of their draft-eligible pass catchers. Zachary Franklin, he had 81 receptions for 1,027 yards and 12 touchdowns. Joshua Cephas, 71 receptions, just north of 800 yards, 6 scores. Then Takorian Clark, 755 yards and 7 touchdowns. Overall, the top 4 pass catchers are back as their tight end is also returning as well. So this passing attack, they're only going to continue to grow, I would say. I like the balance that was maintained, too, because Smith, he's a very talented back. He was originally committed to TCU, flips here to UTSA to replace a big hole in their offense for this upcoming season. So this unit, really good. Jeff Traylor is very happy with what he has there. The defense, that was kind of a question mark. 25 points per game allowed last year. Solid unit. They had good presence off the edge, but that is no more. They have a handful of departures there in that aspect of their unit. But Rashad Wisdom, 5'9", 88 tackles last year from his safety position. They also have a 6'2", 220-pound middle linebacker, Jamal Ligdon. He had 63 tackles himself. This is a tough slate for this team, though. Likely 0-3 non-conference with Houston, Army, Texas, and they have a road game late in the year. I think it's middle part of the year if UAB. They add Nick Troy Fortune from West Virginia to pair up with Ken Robinson and Corey Mayfield, some vet corner. Secondary was a struggle area, but also had their good moments as well. So defense, I'm certainly going to watch to see what they can do, especially the defensive line, because that presence they had, it was the enforcers on this unit. They're now gone. But this offense is going to be terrific. 40-plus points per game this year. They're going to be one of the nation's best. Coming in at third, I have a bit of a bold prediction here. Middle Tennessee. I'm just putting my faith into Rick Stockstill here. This is a team that was pretty impressive last year despite all the challenges they faced, and they tend to make the bowl games. I think it's the last 7 or the last 9 or something. Rick Stockstill's just done a great job with this program. Chase Cunningham, he took over after a few games at quarterback. Only played 8 total before getting hurt. 165 through the air per game. That's obviously not great. They want to get that number higher. 16-3 TD-INT ratio, though. He definitely took care of the ball. Respectable passing game. He gets 2 of his top 4 pass catchers back. Jalen Lane, 42 receptions for 520 yards and 4 scores. Yusuf Ali, 45 grabs of his own, 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Isaiah Gathings as well, 6'4", 225. He was a respectable producer. So this passing game, they have plenty of room for growth, and I think they'll definitely take that. Biggest concern for this offense, only one starter's back on the O-line, 123 rush yards per game. Running game regressed immensely last year. Well, not immensely because they weren't too great to begin with, but they might take another step back. Frank Peasant, 215-pounder, he had 303 yards, 3 scores. They had Joe Irvin from Kansas State. They're looking to add some explosiveness to their offense with him. Somehow they scored 29.8 points per game last year. I think they can eclipse 30 this season. The O-line will have to gel together quite quickly. Offense is certainly kind of a struggle area. I think it's kind of a iffy unit, but I still think they'll shock some people and hit 30 a game just because I think Cunningham's really going to take that next step, and this passing game is really going to lead the charge, and they're going to free things up for the running game. Look at the defense, though. They progressed immensely last year from 35 to a little under 26 points per game allowed this year. 32 sacks. That was 5th in the conference. Jordan Ferguson, this guy was terrific. 6'2", 262 off the edge. Elite work from him. 58 tackles, 17.5 tackles for loss, and a whopping 9 sacks. 13 QB hurries and 3 fumbles as well. He was just a stat sheet stuffer for them. Zaylin Wood and Marley Clark, they were good on the interior as freshmen last season. Some good depth on this unit. Jonathan Butler, 46 tackles at linebacker. He's one of the only notable returnees there at linebacker. Raekwon Hartley, though, he's still filling out his frame up to 198 pounds. Was good as a freshman himself last season, so I think he'll make a nice little impact for them. They only allowed a 58% completion rate. 3K plus yards allowed in the secondary. Was a good secondary, I'd say. They lose numerous starters, mainly to transfer for better opportunities. Quincy Riley, for example, had 5 picks last year. He's off to Louisville. Teledrick Ross, though, 49 tackles, 12 pass breakups. He's back to anchor down his safety position. Overall, I think this is a really good football team. They have some of their issues on offense, and the defense has their own question marks as well. But I think Rick Stockstill's got a nice little bunch here. I think they're going to progress very nicely. This is going to be a year they really shock some people. But if they don't figure things out on the offensive line, then they could be in for another long season. Coming in at number 4, North Texas. They started 1-6 last year, won their final 5 games to make the postseason. They led the conference in returning production here on offense. QB play was very sluggish, though. Austin Ani, he's nearly 30 years old at this point. He's in a battle of 3 transfers, Grant Gunnell being the most notable from Arizona to Memphis. Now he's here. Good playmaking in those 2 starts he had with Arizona 2 years ago. Returned 3 of the top 4 pass catchers as well. Roderick Burns led the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns last year by far. Damon Ward, Bryson Jackson as well. They're back. And then Jeremy Macklin's cousin in Jamori, he comes over from Missouri. So the passing game should start to get back to where Seth Luttrell wants it. We'll see what happens. I think Grant Gunnell's going to be the starter, and I think he'll do very well in that position. They're going to complement a very standout running game, though. Oscar Attaway, 215-pounder, coming off a torn ACL, but in 2020, when he was healthy, 572 and 3 scores in 7 games. He was a very respectable contributor for them. 3 freshman backs had 359-plus yards last year. Isaiah Ragsdale led the charge, though, with 534 and 5 touchdowns. Isaiah Johnson, Oyi Adai, they were all very good producers. 234 rush yards per game last year. I think they're going to start to have some better offensive balance this fall. Both units had that 27.5 points per game figure. That's how much the offense scored. That's how much the defense allowed. So that's very interesting. But the defense cut down on that. From 42 points per game 2 years ago down to 27.5. That's very impressive stuff from a program like this. They lose the Murphy twins to UCLA. Those guys were phenomenal off the edge last year for them. Katie Davis, though, he's back at linebacker, 121 tackles, 5 sacks, and 16.5 tackles for loss. He's a superstar. First team, no doubter. Roderick Brown, he was a solid nose as a freshman. I believe he slimmed down to about 275 now. So not much size or depth on this interior D-line. And, same can be said at pass rush if it's losses. So we'll see what happens there. Larry Nixon, Kevin Wood, 71 tackles and 50-plus respectively, added in with Davis. So they have a promising linebacking core. Run defense took major strides. Nearly 270 yards per game allowed on the ground in 2020, down to 152 this past season. I think they can build off that. But the defensive line progression is going to be crucial here for North Texas. The secondary took some small strides. They're going to need more playmaking, though. Only 1 DB was in the top 9 last year in tackles for the team. That was safety to Sean Gady. So I'm kind of high on this team because I think the offense is going to be really good and the defense has a piece or two to work with. So I think North Texas, they're going to come in at number 4 in the conference. Coming in at number 5, Western Kentucky, historic offense here resets. They lose Zach Kitley, Bailey Zappi, all those guys. Phenomenal unit last year that's going to live on the record books forever, but they now start back to square one. I believe they're going to stick with the air raid here for Tyson Helton, but Jarrett Dagey, he comes over from West Virginia. He's a solid guy. I think he was at Bowling Green before that as well, so he's on his 3rd different team. Only 2 starters are back on this offense, and 2 wide receivers. Dawood Davis with 43 grabs, 763, and 8 touchdowns. Malachi Corley, 73 receptions, 691 yards, and 7 touchdowns himself as a freshman. They had 2 transfers in Jalen Hall, who was a very sound pass catcher at Western Michigan, and Craig Burt. He's a returning veteran. Passing game will stay good, though. The air raid appears to be staying here. I think they'll do pretty good. Of course, they're not going to get anywhere near what they were at last year. It's going to be almost an impossible task, but I think Dagey's a solid guy. He's a solid passer, and they got the experience at pass catcher to get things done. And the running game, we won't really discuss it because in the air raid, they don't really use it a whole lot. About 102 yards per game on the ground last year. The defense gets a good chunk back, though. 2 big losses in Beanie Bishop, D'Angelo Malone. Kincaid was a big-time tackler for them as well. But they got Darius Shipp here to anchor down the nose, 6'1", 305, 41 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. I like him. Juwan Jones as well was productive, but these guys will need to step up. Need more pass rush from him. Jaden Hunter, 67 tackles himself at linebacker. 21 picks from 13 different players. So this was a ball-hawking secondary from a season ago. They do lose a handful of secondary. They do lose a handful of starters. Khalif Halazadi at corner and A.J. Braithwaite, some of the notable returnees. 118 versus the pass. It didn't cover all that well, but they made plays like crazy. I think they'll take backwards a little bit even more, which is tough to say and assume, but I do like the front seven. It's a pretty sound unit in the offense. They'll continue to put up points. So 5th for me, but Western Kentucky could certainly be in for a lot of regression. When at number 6, UTEP. This was a big-time team from a season ago. They really stepped up and impressed people. It was mainly because of the passing attack. They made some big strides. Gavin Hardison only completed 55%, but had 3,300-plus yards. 18 touchdowns, 13 picks, needs to be cleaned up. I think this unit's going to lose a lot of explosiveness, though, because they lose Jacob Cowing and Justin Garrett. Tyron Smith averaged over 17 yards per catch last year, 570 yards on 33 receptions. Other than that, though, 0 returning experience here at wide receiver. They do get 2 backs back in Deion Hankins, who had 453 and 6 scores. Ronald Awatt also found the end zone that many times on top of 854 yards of his own. 140 rush yards per game. They're going to have to lean on them a little bit more, I think, this year. There's a highly explosive offense from last year. That's going to drop off considerably in my estimation just because of the loss at pass catcher. But Hardison took that next step, kind of like Frank Harris at UTSA. Had not been too good in the year or two prior, and then he stepped up and developed immensely. So Hardison's going to have to be a leader for them. It's going to be challenging about those pass catchers. The defense as well, though. These guys were impressive. 34th nationally in yards per game allowed, 349.2 on that mark, 25 points per game allowed. They returned the most production of anyone in the conference here on defense. A very impressive front seven. Praise Omowale, 13 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Udarian Taylor, he had a team-high 6.5 sacks. They're going to pair him up with Keenan Stewart, who was very impressive for them at defensive tackle. I like the depth and experience on the D-line. It's pretty good at linebacker, too. Breon Howard had 108 tackles. Tyrese Knight, 102 stops of his own. Defense had their issues versus the stronger offenses, but they were still good. 6th in FBS and opponent completion rate of 54.9%. They add 3 transfers in the back end. I like senior safety Justin Prince and then Tony Richardson, a corner who had 8 pass breakups a season ago. UTEP, I wish they had more I wish I could say more positive things about the offense because this defense can really back them up this year. I think it's going to be a strong unit for them. But overall, UTEP, I think the offensive regression is going to be too much. That's going to drop them to number 6. The Charlotte 49ers, they returned 74% of their production on offense. Chris Reynolds, he's been around forever, it seems. Nearly 2,700 yards passing this past season, 26 touchdowns, 8 picks, 750-plus rushing yards back in 2019. Not much sense, but he can utilize his dual-threat nature at times. That's a good part of this offense. I think they need to start using that dimension a little bit more. Returning to the top 3 pass catchers, though, Grant DeBoas, Victor Tucker, Elijah Spencer. Those guys were all really good for them last year. Shadrick Byrd as well, a good dual-threat running back. Second-ranked rusher, he had 583 yards and 3 touchdowns. Calvin Camp, he had 635 and 4 scores of his own. He was the leading back for them. So I like this offense, what they have at the skill positions. They got multiple contributors. Solid offensive line that just needs some more consistency. 3 starters are back. Had some real disappointing efforts last season, though, overall on offense. They should certainly have produced more than 27 points per game. And I think this year they will if they can be better on third down and in the red zone. Because the talent is there. The quarterback, he's a veteran. He's been around for forever. So I like Charlotte this year. It's going to be a fun team to watch. The defense gets a good chunk back. They regressed last year. Marquise Watts, 6 foot 218. He's the top defensive end at that size. That's severely undersized, But he's now up to about 240 pounds. It's still not ideal, but he was third on the team with 61 tackles. Led them with 7 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. He was so good for them. They lacked size severely, though, all around on this defensive line. They were 115 versus the run, so that was quite evident. With some big-time contributors in the front 7. Guys like B.J. Turner, Derek Brown, Mike Kelly. Those guys are going to have to step up. They lose 3 starters at linebacker. Handful of safeties here in the back end. They were 108 versus the past a season ago. Geo Howard, Trey Kramer, Solomon Rogers, some guys I'm eyeing. Should be able to score points, but the defense needs to progress immensely. I hate to pick them to go 7 because I think the offense is one of the better in the conference, but defense is certainly a big area of concern. I'm not really sure what to expect from them. Coming in number 8, Nkosi Perry, led FAU team, was pretty solid last year. 2,762 yards, 27 TD to INT ratio for him after transferring over from Miami. And consistent running game. A few strong games, but it was also a variety of poor efforts mixed in there as well. Johnny Ford, 5'5", 175. No size one bit, but he certainly provides them a lot of quickness and explosiveness. 831 yards, 5 touchdowns rushing. He was also the 4th leading wide receiver at 282 yards. They pick up Marvin Scott from Nebraska. The team had 151 rush yards per game. I think that number is going to certainly go up because they now have some more depth and some overall good explosiveness in the backfield. And Perry, he's capable of his legs as well. They returned the top 2 pass catchers from the season ago. LeJontay Weber, 5'11", 163, led team with 65 receptions, 702 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Jaquan Burton, he had 27 grabs for nearly 500 yards, 18 yards per catch. So they got some explosive playmakers here at the skill positions. 4 starters are back on the O-line, so offense should hit that 30-point-per-game mark, only 25 last season. The biggest concern is the defense for me. It was quite respectable. The youth, they were forced to play, made some good plays for them. 25.8 points per game, 405 yards per game allowed overall. Todd Orlando, though, has Evan Anderson to work with on the D-line, who's 6'3", 56. He led the team with 8 tackles for loss. Jalen Joyner, 4 sacks, 5 QB hurries. I see 5 sophomore on the D-line, so at least on my depth chart. So they have a lot of youth here for FAU to work with. Jamie Petway's a Missouri transfer at linebacker. 99th in pass defense, 247.5 yards per game. It was a solid group, though. 13 picks they snagged. They get back TJ Young, Roman Mungan, 5 picks between those guys. Those 4 of the top 5 tacklers. Overall, they add 9 transfers on defense. I think this unit will slightly get better as the D-line's encouraging, but I'm not really sure what to expect at linebacker since there's not much proven commodities there. And in the secondary, it was kind of a sluggish unit at times last year, and they lose a handful of guys. So FAU, this might be kind of disrespectful to put them at 8, but I don't think that the offense, even though they're going to progress, it's not going to be anything to blow you out of the water. Same with defense. I think they'll progress, but it's not going to really show up in the win-loss column. Number 9, LA Tech. Sonny Cumbie replaces Skip Holtz. Austin Kendall departs, so they're back to square one at quarterback. Parker McNeil and Matthew Downing, 2 transfers, will battle for the quarterback position. A little over 50% of production's back, led by 2 talented wide receivers. Smoke Harris, it's his 5th year, 5'6", 189, very explosive, great underneath target for them. 71 grabs, 756 yards, and 6 touchdowns, very respectable numbers from Smoke. The second and third leading wide receivers were freshmen for them, so that's certainly encouraging. Trey Harris, 41 grabs for 600-plus yards. Devontae Lee comes over from LSU, and they get back Griffin Herbert at tight end, 6'3", 223. Bud Means, he transfers to Pitt. He was one of those leading receivers I was mentioning. Only 122 rush yards per game last year, and the top rusher departs. Greg Gardner, though, 6 foot, 211, has about 90 touches in 2 years. He's going to split time with Kevon Henry Brooks. We'll see what these guys can do for the running game. Defense was horrid, though. 34 points per game allowed, 4th 34 yards per game. They returned 8 starters, though, so that's certainly encouraging. Mike Lil Clark, Deshaun Hall, these guys were 2nd and 3rd on the team in tackles for loss. And it was quite poor run defense, though, but these guys were youthful, as was the entire defensive line. Quite poor, though. 25 touchdowns, 166-plus yards per game allowed on the ground. Depth might be an issue on this D-line, but these young guys could certainly make an impact. Tyler Grubbs at linebacker, 97 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. He had 99 and 9.5 the year prior, so he's been just great for them in the first 2 years. They would be in a lot of trouble if they did not have him there to make plays in the middle of their defense. Looking at the secondary, Cedric Woods, B.J. Williams, 2 contributors that are back. 117th overall, though, against the pass. They were much better in conference, though, than out of 5th in the conference with 212 pass yards per game allowed, 7.7 yards per attempt. That was a number they certainly want to lower. So we'll see what happens with LA Tech. The offense, they got some promising prospects on both sides, but overall, this is certainly a work in progress because the offense, not much there to work with. And quarterback battle is going to be something to watch, though. Coming in at number 10, Rice, 4-8 last year, finally found some success, but they're going to go right back down to the dumps this season. 21.5 points per game last year. TJ McMahon, Willie Green will battle at quarterback. 3 different guys were used under center last year, 212 pass yards per game, 16 to 15 TD to INT ratio, 59% completion rate between those guys. Return their top rusher in R.U. Broussard, 569, 3 scores. Camp Montgomery is 5'5", 160, 150 rush yards per game for the team. Bradley Rosner, 6'5". He's back from injury to help give a spark to this receiving core, along with Cedric Patterson, who's got 38 grabs, nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. The speedy Luke McCaffrey moves to wide receiver. Sam Crawford comes over from Tulsa. So some a solid group of weapons here, mainly a wide receiver. Second most returning production in the conference here on defense, allowed over 36 points per game and 7 yards per play, though. 10 starters are back. Josh Piercy, Gabe Taylor, Kirk Lockhart, some of the young guys that made plays for them last year. One of the nation's worst pass defenses, though, allowed 30 rush touchdowns as well. They need to be better all around. Not much to say about Rice because this team is it's not one that's really going to be able to compete much. I think they're going to be back down to about 2 or 3 wins this season. And to cap things off, FIU, Mike McIntyre arrives here. Only 20 points per game last year on offense. They had a good passing game, though. 20 touchdowns, 3,100-plus yards as a team. Bordenschlager was pretty impressive for them. Gunnar Holmberg replaces him. He comes over from Duke. Explosive pass catchers are a big reason why the passing attack had success. Tyrese Chambers, one of those guys, averaged nearly 24 yards per catch. Flirted with the portal slightly, but he opts to return just north of 1,000 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. Added a few transfers. Sherrod Johnson from Syracuse. Randall St. Felix was good for them. He's a USF ad from a few years back. He was third on the team in yards, and then fourth was tight end Rivaldo Fairweather, who's projected by the media to be a first-team all-conference. So they got some nice weapons here at pass catcher. Despite having Devontae Price, though, the running game was not very good. 102 yards per game on the ground. Lexington Joseph, he's a solid replacement, averaging only 5 yards per carry himself. So we'll see what happens there. Regardless, these guys will be throwing and running behind one of the nation's worst offensive lines who gets only one starter back. They were completely awful in pass protection as well. They do add 3 transfers to help out with depth or potentially be starters, but FIU, the offense, they do have those pass catchers, but will they have time? Will they have any breathing room on the ground? Likely not. The defense ranked dead last in points per game and rush yards per game allowed in the conference. Linebacker Gathan Burnell, 44 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. Had a solid debut season. Devon Strickland on the D-line. He had 53 tackles of his own, led the team in tackles for loss and sacks. Only a handful of those guys were good, but good for those guys. They stepped up and they got some leaders now. Overall, 125th in FBS and sacks, only 3 picks as well. So playmaking was lacking tremendously, and I think it will continue to do so. FIU just does not really seem to care about its football program, and I think they'll be at the bottom for a while until they try to switch some things up. I don't know really what they can do. Maybe commit more funding, more effort to this football program. But FIU right now, pretty undesirable. And to cap things off, my conference title and award predictions, I think UTSA will lose to UAB in the regular season, but get revenge in the final game of the year for all the marbles. I like this offense. I think they'll get the best of the UAB defense on that day, but I do think the UAB rushing attack is going to be one of the nation's best, and Dwayne McBride's going to lead the charge and win Offensive Player of the Year in the conference. Jordan Ferguson of Middle Tennessee, he was elite for them off the edge, and I think he'll continue to build off that. He'll win Defensive Player of the Year. Newcomer of the Year, Traylon Smith. He's replacing Sincere McCormick. This is just an ideal replacement. Pick up a guy that comes from a hard-nosed running game at Arkansas, split time of guys last year, so he's plenty fresh. He's going to fill those shoes of ease, and he's going to win Newcomer of the Year, maybe even Offensive Player of the Year as well. And Rick Stock still have Middle Tennessee finishing third in the conference, so he's going to be the unanimous Coach of the Year here for me. And then biggest breakout star, Daywin Davis for Western Kentucky. He's one of the more quieter guys on that offense last year that was highly explosive. They're going to remain in the air raid system, and I think he's certainly going to benefit from that. He'll have a 1,300-plus yard season. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.